Hey everybody, my name is Matthew Bickel, and today I want to talk to you about actions, bonus actions, and reactions in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Now, we're going to talk about what they are, what the difference between them are, and what you can do to get the most out of every turn you have in combat. And we are going to be talking mostly about combat because that's when time really slows down. That's when we really care about what all can you accomplish on your turn in a small period of time. A turn is supposed to be 6 seconds, and so I get to take my turn, which is 6 seconds, and then my friend gets to take his turn, which is the same 6 seconds, and then all the monsters get to do their things, which is the same 6 seconds. And after everyone around the table has done everything they need to do, then we get to go to the next round of combat, which is a brand new set of 6 seconds. So we're zooming in really closely. What all can I do on my turn in this 6 seconds that I'm given? Well, let's look at your turn. You get to move and take an action. That's it. You can have a bonus action if it's afforded to you by circumstances. And when it's not your turn, you can take a reaction, which can also be afforded to you by circumstances. Let's talk about each of these things one at a time. So, movement. Well, we all are pretty familiar with that. On your character sheet, it'll have the movement speed of your character, which is usually 30 feet. Might be more, might be less, depending on what race you're playing or what kind of items you have equipped, what features your class has provided to you. But you get to move, we'll just say 30 feet, which if you're using a grid is usually 6 spaces of movement. Now, after you do your movement, or before you do your movement, you can take an action. We're going to talk about all the different actions, different kinds of actions you can take later in the video. But for now, you do get to take your movement, and then you get to take an action. That's it. Now, what about bonus actions? Well, bonus actions are afforded to you by circumstances. Let's say you are wielding 2 short swords. Well, if you're wielding 2 short swords, unlike just using one long sword, for instance, and going bonk, there's my action, 2 short swords afford you a bonus action. You're using both hands, so you get to attack with your main hand, bonk, and then a bonus action is afforded to you by dual wielding. Bonk, attack with your offhand. Sweet. Maybe there are spells that are available to you if you're a player who can cast spells with your character that are marked as bonus action spells. Make sure you prepare some of those. That way, on your turn, you can take an action and you have a bonus action available to you because you have a spell that is prepared that can be cast as a bonus action. Try to make sure that you look at your character, the features, the feats that you've taken, the spells that you have available, what weapons you have equipped, items you have available. That way you can have as many bonus actions available to you as possible. That way, hopefully, every turn you can move, make an action, and take your one bonus action that's afforded to you. Now, what about reactions? Well, reactions are a certain kind of action that you get to take when it's not your turn that are afforded to you by circumstances. For instance, the most common reaction, probably, is the attack of opportunity, which is when a bad guy moves away from you, or when you move away from a bad guy. But we're talking about your reaction, not the bad guy's reaction. Let's say you're engaged in combat, melee combat with a monster, and the monster moves away. Well, you can look at your dungeon master and say, I'd like to make an attack of opportunity. And he'll say, okay, roll to attack. And you'll get to go through the whole process of attacking the bad guy, and hopefully you hit him. And you've been afforded this reaction, a free attack during what's not your turn, but during the attack round. You're only afforded 1 reaction per round, so use it carefully. Because if you use your reaction to do the attack of opportunity, for instance, and let's say you're a spellcaster, a bad guy attacks you later in that same round, well, you have this awesome spell called Shield prepared that can be cast as a reaction, but you already took your reaction to attack the bad guy, so you can't use the shield. So it's up to you how you use your reactions. Just bear in mind, you've only got 1 afforded to you per round of combat. Now that's how bonus actions, and reactions work. Let's start to zoom in on the different kinds of actions that you can take on your turn. And the first one is the beloved attack action. That's the best action. You get to take your awesome weapon or your just your big strong fist, whatever you want to do, and bonk something on the head with it. That's the most fun thing you can do in Dungeons and Dragons, in my opinion. But how does the attack action work? Well, let's say you're doing a melee attack, you're engaged in combat. You say, I want to attack that goblin. Well, you'll take your d20, you'll roll it, and this is the roll to hit. Attacking comes in 2 parts. You get to roll your d20 to roll to hit. This is to see if you were accurate enough to hit the bad guy. You'll take it, you roll it. Let's say you get a 10, you get to add the appropriate modifiers. Let's say you're using a longsword and you're proficient with martial weapons. Well, you get to take your strength plus your proficiency modifier because you're proficient with the weapon and add them to your attack roll. You rolled your d20, you got a 10, add your strength modifier of 3, add your proficiency modifier of 2, now you have a 15. Is that high enough to hit a goblin? Yes, it is. Awesome. Now I get to do the second part of my attack action, which is rolling damage. Now I get to take my damage dice, which if I'm using a longsword with its versatile property, wielding it two-handed like this, then I get to take my d10, roll that, and add my strength modifier. Not the proficiency modifier, mind you. This is important. When you're rolling damage, the proficiency modifiers don't get added in. It's just your ability score modifier and then any other dice that might be added in. Like, let's say you're a paladin and you casted a smite that gets to be added onto your attack roll. Well, then maybe you get extra d8s of fire damage or something like that. But generally, it's going to be the die for the weapon plus your ability score modifier. That's it. No proficiency bonus for the damage roll. Now, let's talk about critical hits. This is probably the most exciting part of rolling attack roll. Let's say you get a 20, a natural 20. On the d20 die, you roll a 20. Now you've scored a critical hit, which means you get to do much heavier damage than usual. How does that work? Well, when you roll the damage, which is the second part of your attack action, you'll roll your damage dice once and then roll them again. So in the case of the longsword we've been talking about, I get to roll my d10 twice and then add both those numbers together and then add my strength modifier as usual. Remember, you do not double the ability score modifier. You only double the dice, and that's it. And by the way, if you have any feats or features or any sort of things that add more dice to your damage roll, if you get a crit, you get to roll those double too. So if I cast smite as a paladin does, then I get to double those dice too, not just my damage dice for my weapon. So critical hits are a lot of fun. Now let's talk about some of the other actions that you can take on your turn. You can cast a spell. We're going to have a whole different video on casting spells because casting spells is a very big subject. Every class that can cast spells casts them a little bit differently. It's complicated, so we'll have a different video devoted to that. But on your turn, you can cast a spell as an action. And remember, there are some spells that you can cast as bonus actions or reactions, and it will be written as such in the layout for the spell. So make sure you check out the spells that you have available to you and prepare spells that can be cast as actions, bonus actions, and reactions. You can also dash as an action. So on your turn, you can dash as your action, and dashing lets you move double your movement. So let's say you move 30 feet. You can dash and move an additional 30 feet. That's awesome, especially if you have something you can do as a bonus action as well. Disengage. Disengaging is a great tactical action that you can take on your turn because it allows you, if you're engaged in combat with a monster, you can use your action to disengage and then run away from them without provoking an attack of opportunity from the bad guy. This is really useful if you're already heavily damaged or maybe one of your friends wants to cast an area of effect spell like Fireball. Well, you can get out of there without provoking an opportunity attack from the bad guy and go get healing, or your friend can cast a big bad spell and not hurt you in the process. Next is dodge. Dodge is a fantastic action that you can take because you can use your action to say, I'd like to dodge, and then all of the attacks that are made against you for the following round of combat after your turn are made with disadvantage. And if you have to make any dexterity saving throws, you get advantage on the saving throw. That's very, very useful. You can also use your action to help one of your fellow players, your fellow party members. So you can go up to them and perhaps you can help and you get to give them advantage on their attack roll or an ability check. So this is very, very useful tactically. You can hide as an action, which is you say, I'd like to hide. And then your DM will have you roll a stealth check, very much like you would outside of combat if you're trying to sneak into a castle or something. And then you'll add your appropriate modifiers and you'll say, I got a 17. And now your DM knows that all the bad guys who have a passive perception lower than 17 didn't see you hide unless there's no reasonable cover. Obviously, don't try to hide if you're standing in the middle of a room, but let's say you're in a forest and you go behind a tree and then go to hide. Well, sweet. You roll high. Maybe the bad guys can't see you anymore. That's pretty useful. You can also ready an action. This might be the most complicated action that you can take on your turn. Let's try to break it down. You can use your action on your turn to ready an action. And this readied action that you've prepared on your turn counts as your reaction during the round of combat. So if you do this, remember that your reaction is reserved for this readied action. Now, your DM might let you use your reaction as an attack of opportunity or use your reaction to cast a spell, but doing that will probably invalidate your readied action. So be very careful, be very conscious of what you're doing with a readied action and using your reactions that you have available to you. Now, what do you do when you ready an action? Well, you think of something you'd like to do. Maybe you're going to hide behind a door, and when the guy comes through, you want to have an attack action ready. That way, when he comes through, you go, "Wow!" and just blow him to oblivion. Or maybe you want to ready an action so if your friend gets to you in time, you can pour a health potion down them so that they recover some hit points and don't get killed, hopefully. Well, you're going to tell your DM, hey, I want to ready an action. I want to do this particular thing, which, by the way, can be movement because you can choose the dash action as your readied action. If a bad guy comes, close to you, let's say that a bad guy approaches you, well, you can use your reaction to choose the dash action, which means you can use up to 30 feet of movement, if your movement is 30 feet, of course. You can move away from the monster. Hey, if the bad guy comes toward me, I want to run that direction as far as I can. Your DM will go, okay, cool. Now, you've designated an action you want to take as a reaction, and you've designated a specific trigger. If this happens, I will react in this way. Then combat continues, and if it happens, great. Your prepared action that counts as your reaction happens, and good on you for such good planning. And if it doesn't happen, well, it wasn't really a waste of a turn because being prepared is a very, very good thing. It's good to be prudent even when playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons. Now, we got two more actions. You can search, which is basically an investigation check. You're in the middle of combat and you're trying to look for a valuable item. There's a door locked. You need to escape because the bad guy's coming. Well, I want to search this chest of drawers and see if it has a key or something for this door. Okay, well, your DM will say, cool, make an investigation check. You roll your investigation check. Hopefully you roll high enough. You find the key, unlock the door, and get the heck out of there before the ogre eats you all. Or the last action you can take is to use an object. And this is sort of a blanket sort of action. I want to drink a health potion. Well, that's using an object. I want to use a key in a door. That's using an object. So this is sort of a dump action that you can use something that is not a weapon, or maybe it is a weapon, to try to do something that is not attacking a monster or casting a spell or something else. By the way, there's also an entirely different block of actions that's just an improvised action. And this is sort of at you and your DM's discretion. You say, hey, I'd like to do this in particular, and your DM will go, okay, you can do that, but it'll cost you your action. Or maybe it's not as big of a thing. Maybe it's just, trading on a weapon or something, which technically is an action, but maybe it's a small thing, like, hey, I just want to draw a dagger so I can throw it. Well, your DM might say, okay, but that'll count as your bonus action, so you won't have a bonus action later in the round. Maybe it's worth it to you. Just use your own discretion and think about it. This has been video on actions, bonus actions, and reactions. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's cleared some things up. Take care, have fun, and may the dice always roll in your favor.